Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Leah Mitchell, Associate Director of Alumni Relations, and I'm happy to have Candace Esken join us today. Hello, Candace. We're so excited to have you.
Hi, Leah. Thank you so much for having me today.
So, just before we get started, I want to properly introduce our guest. So, we have Candace Esken, PhD, is a professor of management and leadership at Bradley University, a business consultant and professional coach. Her research and teaching focuses on leadership, motivation, and company culture and decision making. Dr. Esken has been invited to speak at numerous national and state conferences, professional events, and seminars. So her work has appeared in top peer-reviewed journals in her field and featured on Psychology Today and in the Harvard Business Review. Welcome, Candace. We're excited to have you here, and we're excited to get started. So I will let you take it away.
Thank you so much for that great introduction, Leah. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I'm so excited to be here and share this Brave Talks with you. This is easily one of my favorite topics I like to speak on. I think it's such an interesting and important topic, and it can be so valuable for people, no matter whether we're talking about in a personal or professional setting. Of course, I will preface our conversation today by saying most of what we'll talk about when we talk about mastering the art of influence is in a professional setting, but of course, we'll talk about those social and personal interactions as well. So why do we care about being influential, right? And I think this goes without saying, but being likable is an important quality to have in all aspects of life. Just some quick takeaways, some quick stats I could share with you from a lot of different studies. But we know that likability and emotional intelligence accounts for over 80% of success in leadership positions. So we know it's not just about those technical qualities, our technical skills, but it's a lot about those influential interpersonal skills as well. They're going to really even outweigh some of those technical competencies at times. And I mean, this is, a little bit of common sense, but of course we have the data to back it up. We know that when we go to work, we're going to be around people for a while, right? You're going to spend upwards of 40, 50, maybe even more hours a week with someone. So at the end of the day, we sometimes just want to be working with people we like, right? So from a hiring standpoint and from a promotional standpoint, we know that likability is going to really contribute to almost 80% of those promotion decisions, because it just comes down to, who do I want to spend a lot of time with? Who do I want to work on these projects with? So again, these skills are going to really help differentiate you in your job at work. And of course, as we're going to talk about, they're also going to carry you far in your social life as well. So before we get going into the conversation, there's a few things I want everyone to keep in mind. So first and foremost, when we're talking about influential tactics, you need to know your audience. So who are we going to be engaging with, right? Is it going to be our coworkers? Is it going to be our supervisor, our subordinates? Is it friends at work, right? Or even outside of work? Maybe it's our social circle. So know who your audience is, know who we want to be influencing and interacting with. Another thing that's really important is you need to be very clear about what you want. And I want to emphasize that. You need to get clear on what you want. What are your goals? And when I say that, oftentimes when I'm working with people and I'm coaching people through what they want, they end up telling me what they don't want, right? So I often hear like, oh, I don't want to be stuck in this job anymore, right? Or I don't want to work with this particular person anymore. I don't want to work with my boss, or I don't want to work on this project, or I don't want to be last on the sales report month after month. And so I hear you and I understand that, but there's really a profound psychological impact that happens when you switch your focus to the things you do want, right? And you're moving towards those rather than focusing on the things you don't want. There is a distinction there, and it'll have an impact. So again, that will be part of our theme as we go. And finally, keep in mind that when we're talking about influential tactics and these interpersonal skills, they're just that. They are skills that you can absolutely improve on with some consistent application and practice. So some of these things might come a little bit more naturally to you. They might be a little bit easier. And some things are going to take a little bit more effort. They're going to take a little bit more practice. And these definitely are things that you can improve on. So sometimes I hear from people like, well, I don't know if that's just, who I am as a person. Well, these are skills that you can develop and put into practice, right? We're not talking about changing who we are. We're talking about changing how we approach other people so we can get what we want. So let's keep those things in mind as we jump into our conversation here. So we're going to talk about the art of influence. And again, y'all, I love this topic. We could really talk forever on this, but I want to try to keep the conversation moving and really focus on some main highlights, some big takeaways we can have from today. So with that, we're going to divide our conversation up into 4 sections, right? We're going to kind of go through a handling people 101. I'll give you 4 major skills that you can walk away with, things to keep in mind that will improve your interactions with anyone under any context. From there, we're going to move into our second section, making people like you. All right. So I'll give you 6 quick tactics. And with that in mind, again, the point of the conversation when we get there isn't to be the most popular person in the room and knowing you're not going to get everyone to like you, right? That's just unrealistic, but to just be a more likable person, which again is going to help you get what you want. After that, we'll move more into our conversation on persuasion, winning people over to your way of thinking, right? Particularly when we're trying to get what we want, we're trying to achieve our goals. And of course, like really making some distinctions with what it means to be a persuasive leader. So engage in persuasive leadership. So our first section of the day, handling people 101, kind of your introductory course to interacting with people. And again, these 4 tactics we're going to talk about are things that you can take into any context. First and foremost, resist the urge to criticize or condemn others. So this can be very challenging, particularly if we're working with people who, maybe rub us the wrong way. But truly, the minute you criticize others or you condemn them for their actions, their behaviors, you're putting them in a defensive position, right? So psychologically, they've switched on their defense tactics and they're just looking to come at you in a way where they're going to justify their actions or just dig their heels in even harder and defend where they're coming from, right? Criticism often leads us to resent the source of criticism, not motivate a desire to improve. Keep that in mind. It is so true, right? Whether it's in your, maybe your home life, with your partner, you probably noticed that. Maybe it's your social life with friends, and especially at work, okay? So try to keep empathy in mind when you're engaging with other people. Understanding that you don't always know where the other person's coming from, what their motivations were. Chances are they had genuine motivations. They were trying their best. Maybe they fell a little short. Maybe it didn't go so well, right? So trying to always put yourself in their shoes, try to come at them a little bit more positively and focus on giving constructive feedback. So rather than offering an evaluative statement like, your project was really poor last month. Okay, that's evaluative. That's not constructive. And it doesn't give them any actionable advice to improve on. Okay, so you want to make sure you give them very much specifics like, hey, that was a good first draft, but I think that we could work on editing, section 2 in X, Y, and Z way. So something more specific, actionable, and frames it in a way that's positive and encouraging. Moving on to our second skill, trying not to complain, right? Don't complain. Now, take this with a grain of salt, of course, because it's natural human tendencies to want to complain when we're in a challenging situation, particularly at work, right? Bad things happen. That's life. Maybe you got passed over for the promotion at work. Someone else got it. Maybe you didn't get that raise you were counting on, even though you thought you deserved it, right? You could be on a project or even working in a department on something that you just really don't like. We aren't drawn to people who complain. In fact, what we know is that being optimistic, being positive is an extremely powerful attractor. So people who tend to maintain a positive disposition, even in the face of challenging circumstances, negative results, are extremely successful in the workplace, right? Optimism really communicates confidence, and we love confident people. Confidence goes a long way in the professional landscape, right? We admire those people, we respect those people, we're drawn to them, we want to work with them and for them. So keep the complaints to a minimum. And if you're going to offer a complaint, like it's just really killing you and you feel like you've got to have that small moment of venting, try to follow it up with some type of actionable alternative, especially if you're complaining to a crowd, right? You might not like an idea or a project, but rather than just shoot it down, follow it up with, hey, I'm not sure that's our best alternative because, offer an explanation, and then follow it up with, I think it might be more lucrative, a better use of our resources if we maybe consider this approach. All right. One thing about complaining is that you're usually contributing to the problem when you're seen as the complainer rather than contributing to a solution, which again is maintaining that positive rapport, being optimistic and forward-looking, and trying to be somebody who contributes to solutions rather than just adding to problems. Third skill we'll work on is offering honest and sincere appreciation for people. The reason why this is a skill is it's easy to offer an empty congratulations or acknowledgement, but you can usually tell when it's half-hearted, right? Is that really coming from a genuine place, or are you just saying it because you feel like you've got to say it, right? So work on having, a little bit of genuine joy for others, appreciating what they do. People are really motivated by feeling needed, feeling wanted, feeling appreciated. And really, people want to feel important. They want to feel like they do matter. What they do at work matters, or what they do in life or at home matters, right? So acknowledging other people's contributions, praising them, letting them know how important that was, and what a difference it made can go a long way. That sort of genuine support is extremely motivating and makes people feel good. And when you take a little bit of time out of your day to, maybe just shoot an email and congratulate someone, or better yet, if you're able to do it in person, it makes people feel really, really good. And they remember that. That makes a really large impact, and it's a really easy thing to do. And finally, handling people 101. Something we want to keep in mind when you're trying to achieve your own goals is you need to realize that helping other people achieve their goals is going to ultimately get you to your goal attainment quicker. All right. So this is a little bit of a framing effect, but when you're working with people, you obviously have to frame conversations in ways that highlights how, engaging in some activity or some project or some action is going to help them benefit them. Obviously, in the long run, it'll benefit you as well. But when you can work with people in that way, it's going to be more rewarding. And truly, you're doing it in a way where you are helping the other person benefit, right? It's not a manipulation tactic. It's not an empty promise. But you think about, all right, what are my goals? Okay, so at the beginning of this talk, I said you have to get really, really clear on what you do want. And when you get clear on what you want, and you think about the individuals involved in that, you think, okay, well, how can I help them get what they want in order for me to get what I want, right? I mean, the simple metaphor, the simple example is anytime you've gone in to purchase a car, you see this firsthand, right? A really skilled car salesperson is going to approach you and get to know you and what you want and need. They're going to make it all about you. They're going to ask you about your personal life, your family life. What do you do for work? They're going to get to know your wants and needs for the vehicle you're going to purchase so they can find a product, right? Find the car that's going to really meet those needs. It's going to offer you the greatest benefit. The whole day is all about you and benefiting you. Now, obviously, when they make that sale for that vehicle, you're going to go home feeling good because you bought the car that has the greatest benefit to you. But that salesperson also got a great benefit by making that sale, right? But they did that by focusing on you. It's the same metaphor no matter what situation you're in, but you have to think about how you can strategically help other people to help yourself. And that's always going to be much more effective than trying to push people into decisions or force behaviors and actions. So keeping that in mind, those are our 4 main tactics you can use to better interact with individuals and get more of what you want. Moving forward into our second part of our conversation today, I want to give you 6 quick tactics that you can start using immediately to get people to like you. Now, again, this circles back to those quick stats I gave you about likability, promotability, how important it is to truly be likable. Again, it's about being regarded in a way where when people think of you, they think of you positively. Again, you're not at work. It's not about being everyone's best friend, being voted most popular, but it is truly about being likable to the point where people want to work with you, right? You're the person who they want promoted, working alongside them in those leadership roles because it's important. So first and foremost, show interest in other people, all right? Genuine interest, make it about others. Ask them questions, dig deeper, ask follow-up questions, show genuine interest because what do we know? People love to talk about themselves. It's pretty easy. I think that goes without saying. So get people talking about themselves and show some genuine interest. With that, number 2, smile. Again, I know that sounds so simple, but again, it's about building self-awareness and being mindful of your nonverbal cues. All right. So when you're showing interest in others, are you making eye contact? Are you offering like a pleasant expression? Are you, looking like you're genuinely interested and happy to be engaging with this person? It can be even something as small as when you pass someone in the hallway at work, do you offer them like a kind smile and just a quick hello? It makes people feel so good and noticed. It's those small things. And we also know lots of research shows that emotions are contagious. There's literally something called emotional contagion. And when you are smiling and positive, people are drawn into that, right? We're very attracted to positive people, optimistic people, and it makes us really like them more. Number 3, remembering names. And this is a tricky one, all right? Some people are genuinely just so inherently good at this. And then sometimes people really struggle, right? You might be the person where you meet someone, you shake their hand. Hi, Robert, nice to meet you. And then literally about 5 seconds later, you've already forgotten Robert's name. This is a common misstep. It's so easy to do because, again, you're so focused on already thinking ahead in the conversation or interaction that you've forgotten to focus on the person's name. This takes a little bit of practice, right? And I always tell people the best way to try to remember someone's name is be very intentional about using it as much as possible in those initial interactions with someone. So find ways to slip it into the conversation as you're showing interest in them, as you're asking them more questions, and that'll help solidify it. And of course, I always say, once you leave an interaction, make a quick note in your phone about that person, right? Little things that you could do to try to remember it, but it goes a long way because we know that people like to talk about themselves. We also know that people love hearing their name being said because quite frankly, it doesn't happen often. And when it does, it makes us feel important, which is all going to feed us into our next 6 tactics, which just feed off of those first 3, right? Being a good listener. So as we're showing interest in others, right? We're smiling, we're engaging, we're using their name. Truly listen, all right? Give yourself a moment to take a breath, take a step back, and don't think about what you're going to say next in the exchange. Most people are not good listeners. They're hearing what you're saying, but they aren't listening to what you're actually telling them. And there is a big distinction between hearing someone and listening to someone. When we engage in conversation, unfortunately, a lot of people are hearing what you're saying the entire time. They're just thinking about what they want to say next. They're thinking about how they want to respond to that engagement, which also means that we're probably not really remembering anything. We're not focusing on the other person. Most of the time, that follow-up is sometimes related, you just made it all about yourself, right? I'm listening to what you're saying, and now I'm ready to tell you something about me or my experience that I had that relates to what you're saying. But now I'm making it all about me and not all about you, right? And this is probably familiar. You've probably had engagements like this. So it takes a little bit of practice, but right, working on those listening skills. And the better you get at that, it'll feed right into number 5, discussing the other person's interests. All right. So as you're listening, you're engaging, right? You're learning more about someone else. try to keep the conversation about them. Like if they make a comment about something they like to do, right? Like maybe Robert says he is really into gaming or reading books. He's an avid reader. Dig more into that, because as you discuss other people's interests, there's usually a story there about how they got involved in that particular hobby or interest. Where did that start? How did it evolve? And that's something that's going to really feed the conversation and probably help you learn something deeper and more meaningful about that other person, right? Tell me, Rob, have you always been an avid reader, or is that something you developed later in life, right? Or what got you interested in gaming? Where did that stem from? So again, keeping those things in mind, all of these really work together to bring us to number 6, which is making people feel important, right? One of the easiest ways to get someone to like you, right, to become a more likable person, is remembering to make other people feel important, right? People want to feel needed, they want to feel wanted, they want to feel like they're interesting, they're valuable, they have something to contribute. So when you're listening, you're asking them about themselves, you're smiling, you're engaged, you're really digging deeper, you're going to make that person feel really important in the moment. And especially when you remember their name and use it again, and it comes up perhaps in a future interaction, that just really, really solidifies that positive interaction and makes you more influential. So those 6 tactics, I know they might sound easy on the surface, but I'm telling you, it's so much more difficult in practice. And now that you know about them, I also challenge you to start paying attention to your interactions today, tomorrow, this week, and noticing how these things are a little bit more difficult than they seem. They take a little bit of practice, they take some application, but they do make a difference. So we've talked about how we can improve interactions with people. We've talked about some quick takeaways to improve your likability with those around you. And we're going to move forward into how we can win people over to your way of thinking. So this is really moving more into that persuasive space, really digging deep with our influential tactics. And you're going to notice that we're going to have some themes, right? You've probably already noticed that as we've gone along. And there is a little bit of redundancy, but that's because we have to make sure that we're hammering home these lessons and understanding how to apply them and really get some use out of them. So if you want to win people over, we're trying to persuade them to do anything, all right? First and foremost, avoid arguments. Again, when you say it out loud, it sounds obvious, but sometimes rather than trying to engage in a positive conversation, we find ourselves just trying to win our point over, all right? We want to be right, especially at work. People can really get themselves in trouble taking this. We want to be right because we're trying to prove our credentials. We're trying to prove that we're a skilled and knowledgeable employee, right? I know my stuff. I know I'm right. But when we get into those arguments, oftentimes we don't walk away from an argument feeling better about the other person we just engaged with. We often feel worse, right? And we have to keep that in mind. It's not productive. We have to always keep in mind, what do I want? What do I want to move closer towards? And that's usually not involving an argument. So keeping that in mind, another thing I want to point out is it's not always about your direct engagement with the individual. But if you're having some of these more abrasive conversations in a group setting, right? Perhaps you're in a meeting, people pay attention to others' behaviors, right? And if you're that argumentative individual and you're criticizing or complaining, people notice that. And that makes an impression on you, right? So that's also going to feed into your likability, right? Is that really the kind of person I enjoy working with? I want to promote. I really want to be in that leadership position. Or is that person just maybe causing more problems than solutions? So again, sometimes that's like a hard thing to hear, but we need to be mindful of these interactions. Moving forward, number 2, respect other people's opinions. You don't have to agree, but you need to be respectful, all right? Particularly in group settings, all right? No snide remarks, no jokes, no putting people down in front of others, right? Be respectful. We're really trying to set that tone for positivity and professionalism, because again, that's going to reflect on you. Number 3 can be a really difficult one, particularly in a professional setting. Admit when you're wrong. Now, I've worked with some leaders who they struggle with this because they believe if you admit when you're wrong, it's a sign of weakness, or it hurts your status or your credibility as a professional. And really quite the opposite. usually that really erodes trust and respect when you're unable to humble yourself and admit you've made some error. Taking that a little bit further, if you're the type of professional who's able to admit, hey, that's an area I definitely could improve on. I might have made a misstep, and I think this is what we're going to do moving forward. A lot of times people admire that. It makes you more relatable. It makes you more approachable, and people really, really admire that. So when it's necessary, admit when you're wrong and keep it moving though, right? We're focusing on how we can improve and move forward. Try to understand other people's perspectives. Again, it ties in with number 2. It's not always about agreeing with others in every situation, but we're trying to be respectful. We're trying to be empathetic. We're trying to genuinely understand where someone else is coming from. There's always a reason why somebody has a perspective or opinion, and you need to try to get to the root of that, because that's going to really help you work well with others, right? That's also going to tie into number 5, getting the other person to say yes. So anytime you're trying to persuade someone to do anything, you've got to find common ground. So if you can't understand someone's perspective, you're never going to find common ground and get them to yes. All right. You're just going to drag out that conversation. It's not going to walk away on a positive note. We want to find common ground, get people saying yes, get to a point where we're agreeing with each other. We're on the same page. We're building that positive rapport. Okay. And with that too, it's letting the other person win. So always, we're avoiding arguments. And again, when I say win, it's not like conceding, like, oh, well, you're just right. I'm not even going to try to have a productive conversation, but it's trying to understand when to pick and choose your battles. Is this really, a hill I need to die on at work today or in my social life, whatever it might be? Or can I just let this person have that? And let's go ahead and find a way to sidestep that and get to the more important topic. All right. We're always focusing on what we're truly trying to get. It's not about winning, right? Usually if you're letting other people sort of have their wins in the long run, that might really help you out more. Okay. We're going to use reciprocity and be generous when we can. Sometimes this can be difficult because human nature, we are sensitive to equity, particularly in the workplace, right? I want to feel like when I put in, a certain amount of effort into anything, I'm going to receive this certain amount of effort back. We're like, keep score with that at work, right? I worked hard, so I deserve this, or I did this favor for, these colleagues. They should pay me back at some point. You'll probably do better by just trying to take a generous approach at work, right? Obviously, if somebody does you a favor, they help you out, you should absolutely reciprocate. You should try to return the favor, but always take a generous standpoint where you're not keeping score, right? You don't have that mentality of, well, they didn't do it for me, so I'm not going to do it for them. That's not going to get you very far, right? And again, when I say other people notice, other people are going to notice your generosity. Other people are going to notice that you're the person who is just a great team player. You help others. You go above and beyond. That's the kind of person we admire, and that's the kind of person we want to work with, and that's the kind of person that we also want to end up doing nice things for later when the opportunity arises. So it may not pay itself back immediately, but people notice. So keeping all those things in mind, it's going to help you be more persuasive and get you closer to your goals. Which brings us to our 4th and final section of our conversation today, keeping things moving. Again, we're bringing a lot of these different tactics and topics together, and I just really want to hammer home how we move this into a leadership space, right? So how do we be a persuasive leader? And it's going to encompass using a lot of the skills we've talked about so far today. But I really want to hammer home a couple things just to make sure we're really clear on things that are honestly more of a dysfunctional leadership approach versus a positive, productive, persuasive leadership approach, right? Again, people hate being embarrassed. Okay. Psychologically, it has a profound effect on us as human beings when we are embarrassed. We're put down in front of others. We're ridiculed, right? Those snide comments in public, whatever it may be. All right. And unfortunately, some of us have been in the room where we've seen that happen. We've seen, maybe our colleagues put each other down and they think it's funny, or we see the leader call out someone's mistake in front of everyone. And what does it do? Well, number one, it embarrasses the person, which usually, again, breeds resentment. They're not going to forget that, right? They're going to really hold on to that. And then everybody else in the room is going to be uncomfortable. They're going to notice that behavior as well. And that's not the kind of leader we admire, or that's not the kind of person we look up to, right? We always have to be very aware. We might think it's cute. And unfortunately, we're human beings. We do have moments of weakness, okay? Work can be very stressful. It can really weigh on you. So you're not asking for perfection all the time, but we're asking for mindfulness and self-awareness when it's most important, all right? The best way to handle any kind of mistake at work is, quite frankly, in a private space. Think about how you would want someone to approach you when you've made some type of error, right? We would probably want someone to pull us aside, have a private one-on-one conversation, and talk about it in a way where, again, we're not condemning the person, but we're just addressing it, in a private manner, but also framing in a way where we feel like we're giving them the constructive feedback they need so they can improve. All right. So major thing to keep in mind. Moving on to that, tying in similarly, we talked about this before, it was admitting when you're wrong. Some leaders really do struggle with, acknowledging past mistakes. There is a better way to approach that, of course, but you don't want to disregard it. You don't want to sweep things under the rug. You don't want to be that person who never apologizes for making an error. We all know those people personally and professionally. And quite frankly, we probably don't have like the best view of them. Unfortunately, we probably don't hold them in the highest regard. Individuals who are able to demonstrate humility as leaders, who are able to admit those errors, have an open discussion about how they can do better and move forward. Again, we admire them because everybody makes mistakes, right? Everyone's going to have days where we're not our best selves. But again, we admire that. It makes you more personable. It makes you more relatable. And those are, again, the people that we want to work with. We've talked about avoiding giving direct orders. We want to try to get people to buy in on their own. When we frame something as a benefit to someone, right, they're going to be much more willing and interested in doing it and being engaged on that particular project, activity, whatever it might be, than when we simply just try to force them to do it. So again, trying to get buy-in that way. We want to avoid setting low expectations for people. This can be a little difficult. So when you're working with people, you may inadvertently communicate that you have low expectations for someone. So for example, maybe you have a newer employee working with you and you give them a project, and you might even say in your conversation like, hey, I know you're new and you're learning, so like just give it a shot, do your best. Well, that's not the most motivating or encouraging way to approach a person, right? You want to come at them with a way where you're like, hey, you know what? We've got this really important project. I'm really excited to have you tackle it. I know you're going to do a great job. That person's going to immediately feel very important, very valued, like their boss has confidence in them. And yeah, they may still make a few errors. It may be new to them, but they're going to be much more inspired than like, well, take it a shot, do your best, it'll be fine. Right? We're not setting the bar very high. We're not instilling that confidence. So really try to be careful about how you approach people with that kind of language. It's definitely going to encourage and motivate them to get a lot more out of their actions. And with that, don't make any mistakes seem insurmountable, right? Obviously, in the moment, whenever something goes wrong or there's an error, it can seem like much more magnified, much more catastrophic than it usually actually is, right? Hindsight's 20/20. So in the moment, it probably does feel overwhelming. But again, as someone who's a leader, you're trying to persuade people, get the most out of them, right? You want to make sure they feel that they can absolutely change, that they can improve, that, whatever happened, again, maybe you share, some story from your past. Listen, we've all been there. We're going to get through it. I know you're going to do a great job. Let's work on, XYZ actionable things and move forward. When you make something seem insurmountable, you've definitely just set a barrier so high that the person doesn't even feel like trying anymore, right? You've just completely dissuaded them from even making another attempt, right? What's the point? So be careful with your language, be careful with your approaches. And that's definitely going to make you a much more persuasive leader, right? Empowering people, motivating people, encouraging them to do their best. So one thing I want to share with you, a couple of just really, really great resources. So I've been talking for about 35 minutes today, and y'all, again, there's just so much more we could really say, but I wanted to give you, again, some very quick, impactful, actionable items that you can walk away from today to work on increasing your likability, increasing your influence at work, being more persuasive in your actions with others. These two books are fantastic reads. They are rooted in a lot of great data and science, not just like, my opinion. So check those out if you're interested. Really, really good to kind of keep in your professional bookshelf. And I also want to share my email with you. I also include a QR code to my LinkedIn. So if there's any questions coming up in your mind as you listen to this conversation today, if there's anything at all that you would like to follow up on, or maybe even talk a specific situation through with me, I am more than happy to do that. Just reach out to me again, either via email or LinkedIn. We'll connect and we will keep the conversation going that way. But otherwise, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much again for having me. And that's all I have to share with you for today.
Perfect. Thank you, Candace. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And Candace, thank you again so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, Leah.